taking a hard left turn, let's talk some DC, where James Gunn debuted the official trailer for Creature Commandos during the Comic-Con panel. Cast and crew, including Gunn, executive producer Dean Lorey, and Alan Tudyk, to name a few, highlighted the animated series' mature, violent tone and Eastern European aesthetic, even comparing it to the TV show Lost, and cited how voices were cast with live action appearances and integration specifically considered, while celebrating the series' unique identity in the context of the new DCU. Gunn, of course, couldn't miss the opportunity to provide minor updates for Peacemaker Season 2, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, Lanterns, and Superman, promising it won't be too long before we see a trailer. But it also won't be too soon. Shut up, James Gunn.
So that literally tells us nothing.
Exactly. It will be a medium before you see a trailer.
It'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Just not on a Wednesday, please.
Beat Daredevil to the punch, yeah. Given the seeming breadth and scope of this universe while still in its infancy, based on these updates, do we dare dally with DC?
I dare dally. I'll dally with DC a little bit. This is really Creature Commandos' moment to shine, and DC's moment to shine. A lot of times when we talk about Comic-Con events, more so San Diego Comic-Con than New York Comic-Con, we talk about who won Comic-Con. Was it DC? Was it Marvel? Was it Marvel by way of Sony? I don't think that's ever happened. But,
that was very charitable of you, Scotty.
But in this case, I will say I think DC did win in terms of actually capitalizing on the event. Yeah, we just talked about some exciting stuff coming out of Marvel, but in terms of like leveraging the opportunity to debut a trailer and get people excited, I thought this was great. I thought it was a fantastic trailer for Creatures Commandos. I always do that. I want to say Creatures Commandos, but it's Creature Commandos. It's tough to say for some reason. And I've been excited for the series all along the way, but I will say this trailer did the most to excite me. I like I said, it was a fantastic trailer. The use of the music from the animals, Please Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, I thought was perfect. In terms of this like Eastern European aesthetic that we're talking about, I was really reminded of the 2005 Guillermo del Toro Hellboy, and I mean that in a good way, where it's kind of differentiating itself from the Suicide Squad iterations that we've seen in the past. We've seen so many of these, ragtag teams kind of put up on the chopping block. This really did feel unique and kind of relishing in that more supernatural kind of creepy, kooky kind of vibe. So that being said, I was surprised that the standout character for me was G.I. Robot. Sean Gunn voicing the character of G.I. Robot. That's the character that I'm the most excited for. But again, focusing in on the fact that they said all of these people were cast with the intention or the consideration that they may make the transition to live action appearances, I find that even more incredibly exciting. And I think a lot of people might be counting Creature Commandos out. Like we were talking about the start of the DCU, and everybody wants to look at Superman as the start of the DCU, but we're going to get Creature Commandos first. That's coming out in December. And then Peacemaker Season 2, I don't know if we have an official release for that. I think we've just been told early 2025, summer 2025. So it may come out right before Superman, maybe right after Superman, maybe around the same time there. But again, with the character of Rick Flag Sr. here being voiced by Frank Grillo, we know he's going to be popping up there. We know he's going to be here. So while people are waiting for Superman to start the DCU, I think those that are invested in the TV stuff, we're going to be already enjoying it and relishing it and getting an idea of what to expect here. So moving on to a couple of other things here. I was actually surprised that of all the things that we got updates on, the one thing that we didn't hear anything about was the Wonder Woman series, the Themyscira series, Paradise Lost. So I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, James, went on record and said, even though you're not hearing updates or things about these series, all of the series or projects that have been announced are, still on the table. So last thing here is, Jay, you said, we don't have any idea about when to, expect this trailer based on James Gunn's comments. And I do agree with you. He's not being very specific, but I would be very surprised if we don't see it before the end of the year. It probably wants to attach itself to some holiday heavy hitters like Wicked and Gladiator 2. If not that, Sonic 3 and Mufasa. So, like we said, just don't do it on a Wednesday, please.
DC was very notably absent from San Diego Comic-Con, so they definitely wanted to take more of the stage here in New York, and I think that's kind of nice that like we had Marvel in San Diego and DC being more New York. It's that way they're not having to compete on those kinds of stages at that level. And I think you're right. I think Superman trailer before the end of the year for sure, because why would you even say that if you weren't going to drop it before the end of 2024?
Sure.
And I think he's just so excited about that project that he's gonna do. He's not gonna be able to help himself. He's got that itchy little trigger finger on Instagram. Like he cannot help himself. All in the game in the chat says he's sometimes a little too online. I've been saying that from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
And so
For sure.
but I love that they had a lot of time to shine. We're talking about doing some comics for Creature Commandos on source pages because that trailer was really exciting, and the idea of like characters jumping from animation to live action is really fun. Like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but on a grand scale. Like I love that.
Well, I'm assuming they said they cast them with the intent of being able to cross over. I'm assuming like they will be live action when they come to the live action properties.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, like, the world's kind of mix. It's fun.
Right. Yeah, mixing it all together.
James will do what James will do.
Indeed.
I don't know, that Robin series, kind of gave off some, or that Robin movie or whatever. What it was like puppets and all kinds of other stuff.
It's called Momo animation. Educate yourself, Jay.
I'm learning on the fly here.
The biggest thing that stood out to me, a few weeks ago, we reported that Alan Tudyk had been cast on Peacemaker Season 2, and we had talked about
or, Superman.
how
Superman is what he's going to pop.
Oh, was it Superman?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I could have sworn someone was casting. Anyway, someone from Creature Commandos was going on Peacemaker Season 2 because we talked about the possibility. Oh, was it Frank Grillo? Okay,
yes.
So that's maybe what I'm thinking of. But that makes me think that the crossover is going to be between Creature Commandos and that to me, like this universe that we saw in this reminded me a lot of literally like some of the same shots from Suicide Squad, the DCEU version, and I'm really curious if they're using Creature Commandos to shift the universes, and they're going to do some like meta stuff with these smaller properties in the beginning to kind of give us extra geeks a way to connect the universes, and then to everyone else, Superman will be the first big property that's just like clean and in the new universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, James Gunn was very specific too, because he was asked about tone. Like the Creature Commandos tone is a lot more violent and a lot more, like you said, Eastern European, which like I love that description for it. But that idea of it's got a very certain aesthetic, and he was asked, does this sort of share an aesthetic with Superman? Because everything we've seen about Superman is that it's a little brighter, got a little bit more of maybe a little like a kind of a different vibe, and he was very clear that like these projects are all developed as very different things. Like we are not aiming for, yes, it's connected, but we are not aiming for an overall aesthetic. We do not expect these movies and shows to share an aesthetic and to kind of give off the same tone, which Marvel has sort of given off a similar tone across their films, and I think that's part of their success. But again, we've seen Marvel kind of experiment with that a little bit to varying levels of success in recent years with playing with their genres and things like that. But really, I'm not even really focusing on Marvel. I'm thinking more about the Snyderverse and how all of those films in the Snyderverse had a very certain aesthetic, right? I mean, you turn on Superman or Man of Steel, you turn on the Justice League, you turn on Wonder Woman. All these movies have a like Aquaman, like all of them, they were made with that in mind. They wanted to have the shared universe, but they wanted to have a shared aesthetic. The idea was that you could go from movie to movie, and it was a very similar tone. But he was very apt to say, didn't point fingers or name names, but he was very like clear, like Lanterns is going to be extremely different than Superman, and Superman is going to be extremely different than Creature Commandos, and Creature Commandos is going to be very different than Supergirl, and we're just letting these tones take their own paths, which I think is good. I mean, we want DC to differentiate itself. We want, and we know James Gunn, he might post a little bit too much online, but he is very good at empowering creators. I mean, we've seen that with him before, is he does take creative It does seem to give creative control to the right people. So I really focused in on that quote when I saw the main quotes that he brought out, was that idea of like, look, we're not telling people, we're not telling the guys at Lanterns they got to make this more like Superman or vice versa. Like, we're letting people make the things they want to make. They have a shared universe, but we are not beholden to a certain vision.
Yeah. I'm glad you honed in on that, Jay, because I do think it is important. And in the vein of DC differentiating itself even from its existing stable of properties there, going back to Creature Commandos, like we're talking about this more mature and violent tone. DC is actually no stranger to, like, you know, more mature animation. They've had a lot of success with series like Harley Quinn and stuff like that. But this is very different from something like that, whereas that's like a show that you would expect to see on Adult Swim or something like that. Lots of crude humor. I'm sure there will be tons of crude humor here as well, but just the presentation is just entirely different.